I think there's a common misconception that you're gonna make the previous thing that we make, but AI film, AI novels, AI images. And I keep comparing this to when the invention of the camera happened. Eventually, the camera created an entire new art form that we call cinema. Cinema is a new art form that was created entirely by a technological breakthrough. We're in that early journey of understanding AI as some sort of a new camera. And I think for me, the most interesting thing is to try to build the next frontier of things, not to try to incrementally make better the films that we have right now.